what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Join Mike on the air. Call toll-free 800-313-9443.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, July 24th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauha on a Friday, and another crazy weekend of whatever it is they're going to be ditching up for us there. So the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. Okay, so today was the day that Robert Mueller testified before Congress, and it did not go very well for those Democrats who were still hoping that there was going to be a bombshell that would deliver a death blow to the Trump presidency. In fact, it was pretty much tepid. Even the New York Times said this was Mueller's make or break moment. And it was a mistake for the Democrats to have bet the farm on him. If Mueller had incriminating information yet to share, or had been stymied from doing his work, or if Attorney General William Barr had somehow misrepresented his findings, then it stands to reason Mueller would be welcoming the opportunity to appear before Congress, not resisting it. He had to be subpoenaed. The reality is Mueller's investigation did not indict anyone on the Trump campaign for collusion with Russia, or even for anything related to the 2016 election. Now, Mueller was stumbling and stammering through the dud hearing. He claimed he had no idea about the dirty dossier, the Steele dossier, or even Fusion GPS. And at one point was asked which president first appointed him as a U.S. attorney. He couldn't even remember that. So it was an embarrassing performance here. The one thing that Mueller kept putting on out there is saying they couldn't prove that Trump didn't collude with the Russians. They couldn't prove he didn't obstruct justice. And so in the Mueller report, they said he was not exonerated. And apparently, Representative John Ratcliffe took Mueller to Trump again, took Mueller to the woodshed about that one, asking Mueller if he could name any prior instance of this not exonerated standard ever being used by the Department of Justice, and of course Mueller could not. It was just something they made up to sort of imply that Trump was guilty of something, even though they couldn't find anything. So Mueller refused to discuss the Russia probe origins or the Steele dossier, and basically during his opening statement before the House Judiciary Committee, he expressed his reluctance as an appointed prosecutor to testify before Congress and warned he would not answer certain questions. So it was definitely a hostile witness, and he said the reason his testimony would be limited is that his public testimony could influence ongoing matters. So he's implying there is still some case being built regarding the Steele dossier, Fusion GPS, and maybe they're still holding out a fond hope they can find something on Trump. Article out of the Political Insider basically saying that the Mueller hearing is nothing short of a disaster for the Democrats. And for one thing, he didn't seem to have a good, solid knowledge of his own report. And Mueller himself said his testimony would consist solely of his already public 448-page report, and he would not provide information beyond that, which is already public in any appearance before Congress. So it was just embarrassing. You know, after all the buildup and we're going to subpoena him and everything, it was There was no there. It was embarrassing here. I mean, Mueller said the president cannot be charged with the crime, but insisted his report that the president was not exculpated of crimes. So it was embarrassing here. All right, the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerrold Nadler rejected Justice Department limits on the Mueller testimony. Yesterday, a senior Democratic U.S. lawmaker accused President Trump's Justice Department of arrogance in instructing the former special counsel to limit the scope of his remarks and said it lacked the authority for such a directive. Alrighty, we're going to do a shout out now to our Honor affiliates who are just now coming online, rejoining our network here. Okay, so if nothing else, I think Mueller's testimony pretty much wrecked his own reputation. Everybody was waiting on him for 2 years to come up with the goods on Donald Trump. He failed to do that. And it's starting to look like he just wasn't very bright. He was just willing to do things other people were not, which is how you get ahead in Washington, D.C. But it looks like the fates have finally caught up with him. Okay, just give me 2 seconds here. All righty. And there we are. Okay, so let's talk about Jeff Epstein, because I'm not letting that one go. Corporate media is trying to bury it, make it go away. I'm not going to let it go. Apparently, at one point, Deutsche Bank actually flagged Jeff Epstein's overseas transactions for suspected sex trafficking. And Deutsche Bank uncovered these suspicious transactions in which Jeffrey Epstein was moving money out of the United States. The bank reported the transactions to a federal agency in charge of policing financial crimes after the bank began to look for signs that Epstein was using his funds for sex trafficking. Epstein is said to have moved his money to Deutsche Bank's private banking division after J.P. Morgan Chase cut ties with him in 2013, 5 years after he pled guilty to state prostitution charges, one of which involved a minor. Okay, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I have one thing that a lot of people might not realize. People talk about gerrymandering and the Supreme Court and the case in North Carolina. You've heard of all that, right? Well, it's very interesting. People don't know that Jerrold Nadler, his district, is unbelievably gerrymandered. He has one little circle in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. And then he has a circle in Brooklyn. They're not contiguous. They're not just separated by water. They're separated by one swath of land in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn. It's possibly the most blatantly gerrymandered district in the nation. I don't even know how that happened. If you would check it out, you'll see it.
Well, a lot of people think that gerrymandering is a bad idea, and it is used to try, to gain advantage for representatives of certain parties. But you're right. What you're describing there just shows how ridiculous it can get.
Yeah, and I want to mention, sometimes I call some of these people up, on the congressional switchboard. His people usually answer. There are some who, their phone you can never get, so they don't answer it. For instance, Schumer, it could be 1 out of 100 times you might get through. There are some who are always on voicemail, and there are some actually their aides will actually hang up on you if you say something that they don't agree with. I've been hung up on more than once.
Okay.
And so, there's a lot more to talk about, but I want to restrict my conversation to that today. Anyhow, have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So getting on back to Jeff Epstein, there is a story that is emerging now that Donald Trump and Jeff Epstein had a parting of the ways starting back in 2004, and it had to do with a very expensive property that had been foreclosed on, and Epstein wanted to basically pick it up at the foreclosure sale, renovate it, and flip it. And he shared that information with Donald Trump because he figured Donald Trump at that time didn't have the resources to grab the mansion. Trump proved him wrong and succeeded in acquiring the mansion out from under Epstein at the foreclosure auction. And Epstein was furious about it, threatened to basically go to authorities and expose Donald Trump as a financial fraud. It was at this point, all of a sudden, that the police became aware of Jeff Epstein's predilections with younger girls. And the growing story is that Trump sort of expedited that, moved it along, made a phone call, dropped dime, basically is what he did. And that's pretty hard shell. Now, Trump back in 2015 spontaneously raised the prospect of Bill Clinton being ensnared by Jeff Epstein's little sex traps, the honey traps. And this was before he announced his 2016 presidential run. And he was giving an interview, and he was asked about Bill Clinton. He said, well, he's a nice guy, but he's going to have some problems, regarding that island down in the Caribbean, Jeff Epstein's island. So, yeah, Trump knew what was going on, and he knew that people could be blackmailed with it. And we'll wait to see what happens in Epstein's new trial. But I would say probably Epstein has a lot of little names stashed away that he's threatening to reveal unless they figure a way to get him out of that prison. Now, it turns out, we were talking the other day about Epstein set up a company called Liquid Funding Limited in Bermuda, and it basically collapsed with a huge amount of debt. It turns out that that company was created to hide toxic assets owned by Bear Stearns. And that allowed Bear Stearns to continue to get AAA ratings and Tier 1 status, because all the bad assets were moved over to Bermuda. And then at one point they got that bailout to clean up the mess. All right, well, Tulsi Gabbard is back in the news again. She's still trying to get to the fundraising needed to take part in the next Democratic debate. And a lot of people are of course, are opposed to her. But there's a growing concern within the Democratic Party that if Tulsi Gabbard is kicked out of the next debate, that she may go third party. And then she become a real wild card, loose cannon on deck here. But Tulsi Gabbard came on out with a condemnation, declaring Kamala Harris is not qualified to be president, saying that she lacks the temperament to be president. Representative Tulsi Gabbard slammed Democratic presidential primary opponent Senator Kamala Harris as not qualified to be the nation's next commander-in-chief. And she said, I can say this from a personal perspective as a soldier. She's got no background or experience in foreign policy, and she lacks the temperament that is necessary for commander-in-chief. For that matter, so does Trump. So I'm hoping Tulsi's going to do okay. And we have another caller on the line, Steve in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just want to point out something. I listened to the True News program last night, and they had a very good program. Very interesting, and they're talking about an upcoming movie called Roy, Where Is My Roy Home? It's going to be released in late September, October, maybe early November. Talks about the strange relationship that Trump had with Roy Cohn, who was Pat Tony Salerno, David McCarthy's lawyer,
Okay.
and other notable figures. And there's a weird picture in there. Of course, Roy Cohn was one of these guys that was a big-time homosexual, but persecuted other homosexuals. And there's a weird picture, if you go to the Vanity Fair thing, where Trump is dressed up as like a Roman, like a gladiator, but he looks really feminine. He's got eye makeup on, and he's standing right next to this guy. And the True News people think that really weird things are going to be brought out about Donald Trump with this guy coming out. So I just wanted to put it out.
Well, I mean, was the photograph taken on Halloween?
Heard about that. I don't think so. I think it was taken at that Studio 54, which is famous, for a lot of gay stuff.
Yeah, it was also famous as a place where you dress up in a lot of costumes. Not everybody who went to Studio 54 was gay.
I know, but if you look at the picture, it just looks weird. You got to see it. Mike, I don't see you dressing up in a costume like that. There's something about it.
Oh, you got to see me on Halloween. Yeah,
but
no, I love dressing up in costumes. I not anymore. I just got done selling them all, but I have this mountain man outfit, and I got all kinds of magician's robes and a pirate outfit, and I love that stuff.
Well, basically, what this is going into, though, is strange relationship with Trump and this guy Cohen. And this guy Cohen was a bad dude.
Yes, he was.
I mean, he did a lot of bad things. So,
well,
anyways,
actually, there was a movie a while ago. It starred James Woods, who played Roy Cohn, and it was about just how crooked he was. But he was somebody that you went to if you needed some dirty work done. Yeah, right, exactly. And this is more or less dealing with him and Donald Trump's relationship. Well, again, somebody like Roy Cohn, you'd rather have them as a friend than an enemy, even if you're not doing business with them.
Yeah, they said they were talking about it last night that Roy Cohn. I guess there's written messages from his secretary and stuff that Donald Trump used to call him 20 times a day. I mean, I don't know.
That sounds like business deals. That sounds like business deals going down.
Weird stuff. Anyways, I'll let you go, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And we're coming up on a commercial break, after which, of course, we'll come on back and do more news here. So stay tuned. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer, anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. This morning and this afternoon, I was watching the Mueller report, and to be very honest with you, even though I read the report several months ago, I was very disappointed with his testimony. It seems like either he's getting early stages of Alzheimer's or slowing down, but I was not that impressed.
Well, he really didn't have anything he could talk about. I mean, he's there being grilled by Congress. The Democrats are there just waiting for him to come up with a bombshell, and he didn't have one. So, and you're right. You can tell he's starting to age with all the stammering and stuttering.
Right, but you know what though? I don't care how people feel, what they feel about the Mueller report. My concern is the person in the White House. He's dividing America. He's not doing anything to help the average American citizen. And I'm afraid one of these days he's going to wake up and say, look, you know what? Let's go to war with a country. And I'm just concerned about that.
Well, yeah, it does seem like, he does flip-flop a lot on this whole idea about going to war with Iran or something.
Right. And tell me this. I don't know if he's going to get reelected or not, but if he gets reelected, do you think there's much future for America?
No, I think this country is in decline, and I don't see any way to reverse that.
Right. I would agree with that. Okay, Michael, you take care.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Phone lines are open. And here we are. Okay. There has been a federal labor complaint filed against the Bernie Sanders campaign just days after Sanders had reached an agreement with his campaign's unionized staffers. And the complaint, posted Monday on the National Labor Relations Board's website and noted by Bloomberg Law, alleges several potential violations, including concerted activities such as retaliation, discharge, discipline, illegal interrogation, repudiation, and modification of contract. Basically, this is all coming from the fact that Bernie Sanders' unionized workers demanded a 15-hour minimum wage, and he said, yes, you can have one, but we're going to cut your hours back. And that's where this all began here. Meanwhile, Judicial Watch has filed an ethics complaint against Ilhan Omar over numerous allegations of fraud and repeated criminal action. And apparently this involves student loan fraud, issues with taxes, marriage fraud, immigration fraud. Apparently it's quite a huge pile. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, Ted Cruz has called on the FBI director to investigate Antifa for masked, anonymous, violent terrorism. And Ted Cruz is saying this is an appropriate use of the RICO statutes to basically go after them and try and tone them down, which I think would be a good thing. Meanwhile, over at MSNBC, Chris Matthews and his guest claimed that the MAGA movement is a white identity cult that rejects American values. Now, one of the things that always bothers me is, what are these American values everybody's always talking about? Because that is never made clear. We're just supposed to say, oh, these are American values, therefore we must protect them. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. wait a minute. My mistake. I got another minute to go here. All right, so, pardon me. Everyone's talking about American values. Everybody's saying, ooh, you've got American values. And, you know, who decides? Who decides? I've got my own set of values, and I'm an American. But they may not be the same values that other people have. And as far as Make America Great Again, I think a lot of people got on board of that without having to be involved in white identity. We'd love our country to be great again. I thought Trump was talking about rebuilding our factories and infrastructure, not declaring war on the rest of the world, but that's what MAGA meant to me. Anyway, okay, now it's time for the commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Getting onto the international news, Iran has announced that their military will secure the Strait of Hormuz. As you know, there's been this kind of back and forth between the U.S. saying, well, you know, we're going to take care of the area, and Great Britain saying, no, the EU should be taking care of the area. And Iran has come on out and said, well, you know, it's actually our territorial waters. And so our military forces will secure the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is saying they will not allow disturbance in shipping in the sensitive area. So we'll see what's going to happen. Of course, we've had the inflamed tensions where Britain captured a Iranian tanker near Gibraltar in international waters. That's made things a little bit more difficult. And Iran claims to have had just cause to grab a British flag tanker that supposedly rammed an Iranian fishing boat because it was operating outside the safe zone. So we'll see where that's going to go. And it's probably just as well that Iran is going to take care of the Strait of Hormuz, because Japan has bowed out from this idea of joining the U.S. proposed maritime coalition to protect the maritime shipping lanes in the Middle East. So Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshida Suga said yesterday there's no change in the country's stance previously stated. So they want to stay on out of this one. And don't blame them. I don't know how much of their oil they get from the Middle East. Okay. Iraq defies the United States and will reopen the border with Syria during the next 60 days. So the Iraqi military commander in the Al-Qaim district of Al-Anbar, Ahmed Jadayan, told the Russian news site the border crossing connecting the Syrian Arab Republic and the Republic of Iraq will be opened in the next 60 days. And he says, there's not much that needs to be done to reopen the border crossing, as the majority of the region is desert terrain. So basically they're going to throw up the gate or take down the chain or whatever it is that's closing the border crossing right now. But what we are seeing is that Iran, Syria, and Iraq are starting to cooperate with each other. And after the reopening of this eastern Syria crossing, Tehran plans to connect with Damascus. So this agreement between Baghdad and Damascus will reestablish the first official border crossing that links the Syrian Arab Republic and Iraq since ISIS defeat. That's got to be making both Israel and the United States very nervous. Meanwhile, Israeli missiles have struck a strategic hill near the Golan Heights. Israel is insisting that they just killed a bunch of Iranians, and they're proud to kill Iranians. But Syrian state media is saying there was material damage, but no casualties. So this mountain Tal al-Hara is the highest point in the Daraa Governorate and overlooks the Golan Heights, which Israel occupied in 1967 and annexed in 1981. Israel has struck the strategic location before, firing a number of missiles at it back on June 12th. Meanwhile, Israel is continuing their rampage of destruction in this Jerusalem village on the outskirts of occupied East Jerusalem, on the excuse that they're just a little bit too close to the security barrier, and they've got 13 buildings targeted for demolition. Many are still under construction. These are like brand new, and they're located in the Wadi Hummus neighborhood on the outskirts of Surba here. And families were apparently just rousted out of their beds, expelled from their homes, and just forced to watch helplessly as the army destroyed them all. So, Lebanon is accusing Israel of threatening their civilian infrastructure. And Israel told the United Nations Security Council that Iran was exploiting the port of Beirut to smuggle weapons to the Hezbollah movement. So Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon said that in 2018 and 2019, Israel found that Iran and the Quds Force have begun to advance the exploitation of the civilian maritime channels, and specifically the port of Beirut. Danon told the Security Council the port of Beirut is now the port of Hezbollah. And Israel sees Hezbollah as the biggest threat on its borders. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives here in the United States of America is expected to fast-track 3 measures on behalf of Israel. The first is a law to give Israel a minimum of $38 billion with a B, a law to sanction foreign groups and individuals who support the Palestinian resistance, and a resolution expressing opposition to the global boycott of Israel. That one already passed this morning, and of course is completely unconstitutional. Meanwhile, Israel is attempting to censor the European Parliament amid growing support for Palestinian rights. And a Palestinian writer, Khaled Barakat, is continuing to fight back against a political ban imposed on him by Germany, while Israeli officials are attempting to pressure the European Parliament over inviting Palestinian speakers to discuss the repression they face in Europe, as well as under Israeli occupation. Now, Barakat has filed an urgent appeal in German courts against the ban on his participation in political events and activities on Palestine. And he spoke to the European Parliament on the 10th of July about the repression faced by Palestinian activists, along with Sambadun International Coordinator Charlotte Cates and European Coordinator Mohammed Khatib. So Israel has a lot of clout in Europe as well as the United States. Upon what meat doth this our Israel feed, that it has grown so great? Meanwhile, over in Egypt, Egypt has received 101 mine-resistant, ambush-protected armored vehicles from the United States. These are these big, heavy, huge trucks, and we used one as a prop on the pilot for the new Hawaii 5.0, so I got to look at one close up. And big, heavy, obviously very expensive, and apparently the U.S. just bought a bunch of extras and said, well, we'll just give them to Egypt for the fight against terrorism. And they're considered excess defense articles. Well, I don't know what an MRAP costs, but I imagine that money, if they didn't really need the MRAPs, that money could have been put to better purposes, like fixing the roads, schools, things like that. Our government is just in love with war. They just want to buy the stuff. They want to keep those contracts going, even if it means if other parts of our society are going without, like the homeless. Okay, apparently the tension between the U.S. and Turkey is starting to ramp up, and top Democrats on the Senate Foreign Relations panel are urging Donald Trump to sanction Turkey over the S-400 buy. And basically they're saying that Trump must impose sanctions on Ankara for accepting the S-400 system, or U.S. measures against Moscow will suffer. Now, the U.S. has already pulled the plug on Turkey's participation in the F-35 program, which is actually probably a favor to Turkey. Turkey's already said that if the U.S. imposes any kind of sanctions, they will come back with a proportionate response. So the United States is making enemies of pretty much everybody in the world, even our former friends. So apparently Trump and U.S. Republicans, senators, are having a meeting at the White House to discuss possible Turkish sanctions. Okay. Apparently, U.S. Senator Rick Scott, ahead of the meeting, said he wanted to propose a resolution that calls on the United States and its allies to discuss the future role of Turkey in NATO, given its engagement with Russia. And I know that's already come up a few times, where you can't be in NATO and be friends with Russia. That's the rules. That's the rules. And Turkey seems to be moving away from NATO and more toward Russia anyway. All right, down in Venezuela, they've got the lights pretty much back on following yesterday's blackout. And they're still saying it was some kind of electromagnetic attack against the power grid. And not exactly sure what that means. But Venezuela's opposition, Juan Guaido, sought to basically exploit the anger over this blackout. But turnout at a Caracas demonstration was relatively modest. So he's not getting any traction here. So it was a nearly 9-hour outage. And of course, Juan Guaido is saying years of mismanagement and corruption are to blame. I think it's a cyber attack of some kind. Now, the United States has sent a threat to Nicolas Maduro that he has a short deadline to leave power with any kind of guarantees if he does not want to face international justice and further sanctions. So these announcements were made yesterday to the FA news agency by the White House official for Latin America, Mauricio Clever Caron. So according to him, Maduro was informed indirectly through a message sent through an intermediary that he must leave before the end of the year. And the U.S. says they're willing to offer Maduro guarantees he'll be left alone if he leaves Venezuela before the end of the year. That there will not be any indictments or legal ramifications. They'll just set him up in a little bungalow someplace and leave him alone. Over in Puerto Rico, the protests are continuing. They're in their 6th day following violent clashes between demonstrators and police in the capital of San Juan. Now, fewer people have turned out compared to earlier in the week, likely reserving their energies for a big show of force over the weekend. Likewise, police turned out in more standard gear to control the protests and not the gas masks and armor they wore previously. Now, authorities have issued search warrants for cell phones used by Puerto Rico Governor Ricardo Rossello and his aides to send sick, private chat messages about gays and hurricane victims. Now, remember, what started these protests was the leaking of a whole bunch of texts of homophobic messages by the governor. So I guess they're really touchy about this stuff down there. So one of the search warrants said that the government officials used the chat to transmit official and confidential information to private citizens in potential violation of ethics laws. Gotta play by the rules there, right, Hillary? Okay, North Korea has released pictures of a new submarine that it could potentially use to launch nuclear weapons. And if that's the case, the country may have gained a very dangerous, stealthy ability to threaten the U.S. and its allies, all in defiance of Donald Trump. Now, yesterday, Pyongyang released the images of North Korea leader Kim Jong-Un on the inside of the submarine, looking at the control area. Today, they have released these images of Kim Jong-un standing in front of the exterior of the submarine inside a shipyard, and it is a large one. And experts say it's large enough it can carry missiles equipped with nuclear bombs, allowing Kim to order nuclear strikes from unknown underwater locations. Yeah, if Kim Jong-un has done that, he has definitely leapfrogged ahead. Okay. Turning to the economic news here, JP Morgan is out there saying, we believe the dollar could lose its status as the world's reserve currency. And the reality is that no one currency has remained in that position of dominance for more than a few hundred years throughout history. We've got the dollar now. Before that, it was the pound. Then you had the Spanish real. You had the Portuguese currency. They all took their turns as the dominant international global currency, and they all lost that status when inevitably there was adulteration of the currency and people lost trust. Because for a currency to be a global standard, there must be trust in it. But reserve currencies don't last forever. And the US dollar could just fade into history. Okay, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. I want to back up to the international news here because this just got put up at whatreallyhappened.com by one of our members here. And the other day we were talking about how there was this incident where these Russian aircraft were fired on by South Korean warplanes. And the South Koreans were saying Russia was in their airspace, and Russia was saying we're in international airspace. Russia is now admitting that they had invaded South Korea's airspace. They're blaming it on an equipment malfunction. And if you believe that one, I have a gallon of borscht to sell you. Getting on back to the economic news here. Silver is on an upswing. It's still undervalued relative to gold. But it's starting to strengthen, and it's over $16.50 per ounce, which is pretty good. So they're expecting silver will continue to rise. So remember the old rule: buy low, sell high. All right, Iran is moving to legalize cryptocurrency mining, recognizing that the energy-consuming digital coin mining is a legitimate industry and potentially a way around the U.S. sanctions crippling their economy. So a mechanism to mine digital coins was approved by the government's Economic Commission and will later be put to discussion at a cabinet meeting, said Central Bank of Iran Governor Abdul Nasser Hamati. So that may be one way to get out of it, except that Bitcoin took a major hit, I think, over the weekend. Anyway, the trade chief of the European Union is threatening to hit the United States with duties if the U.S. imposes any more tariffs on their cars. And they're talking about 35 billion euro worth of duties. And basically, now we're in a trade war with the EU. It's just not working out very well, is it? The other day we were talking about the homeless problems in Los Angeles and San Francisco. There's also a huge homeless problem in Berkeley. It turns out, though, that Oakland has a higher per capita homeless rate than either San Francisco or Berkeley. Oakland has a homeless population of 4,071 people, according to data collected by Oakland and Alameda County officials. And we're going to take a break here for station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Donald Trump is now out there having his little press conference, his turn at bat, if you will, after the Mueller hearings. And yeah, he's out there saying definitely a disappointment for the Democrats here. Getting back to the economic news here, apparently Bitcoin has seen $18 billion of its value wiped off the market cap since the 4-hour death cross. It is highly volatile, which is what makes it risky. And it doesn't have any backing. And it's kind of nice to see that there are some cryptocurrencies coming online that do have a commodity base that they rest on. Okay. Apparently, the world's major central banks are engaged in a war to determine who can make their respective fiat currency weaker. And with the likelihood of even more money printing and negative interest rates ahead, people, meaning you, need to be ready to see the value of their money evaporate and the price of everything else go up. So now we were looking at the US, the EU, and Japan are in a cold currency war. Okay. The over at the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, Chris Neal of Orinda, California, basically approached the Financial Times about the very obvious market manipulation of gold and silver, written by gold researcher Ronan Manley. And apparently over at the Financial Times, their attitude was, this is a matter of no importance whatsoever. Who cares about the prices of useless metals? So the financial media doesn't like silver and gold. They consider it useless. As you know, over in Great Britain, Boris Johnson won the election. He's going to be the new, well, he is the new prime minister. Apparently, he just gave his first speech. Tony Blair is already taking pot shots at him, saying the new leader's threats to leave the EU without a deal were not to be trusted, and said that Boris Johnson's populism is worse than Trump or Salvini. Oh, that populism, that's such a bad thing. You know, democracy and sovereignty and populism. So Tony Blair, Phony Tony is definitely a globalist. There's no way around that one here. Piers Morgan is mocking liberal snowflakes who are screaming with horror at Boris Johnson's elections. And apparently, Johnson got 66% of the backing from Tory members in the leadership race. And apparently, Piers Morgan was out there saying the more the usual insufferably self-righteous, PC-crazed, virtue-signaling liberal snowflakes suspects scream with horror about Boris, the more I'm warming to the idea of him as prime minister. I mean, he only just got the job here. Anyway, Boris Johnson will meet with Donald Trump 3 times in 100 days before Brexit. And Trump is out there expressing his confidence that Boris Johnson will get the Brexit done. And Johnson wants to build on Britain's special relationship with the United States. But he basically campaigned on, we're going to get Brexit done. And here we are. Alrighty, so over at the BBC, the network that reported on the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 26 minutes before it actually happened, apparently BBC News viewers were very unimpressed when BBC Breakfast, which is the morning show, aired 3 politicians who didn't like Boris Johnson, aired one after the other. And apparently some of the viewers got very vocal about how furious they were at BBC's bias. And they said, I'm just sick of it. Okay, over in Denmark, the Social Democrats, well, first of all, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The Social Democrats became the biggest party in the Danish election last month, and the populist Danish People's Party plummeted, much because the Danish Social Democrats had adopted some of the Danish People's Party's popular and relatively strict immigration policies. Okay, but now that they've won the election and Mette Frederiksen from the Social Democrats is the new prime minister, she and others in her party have started to liberalize the immigration policies, much because of pressure from 3 far-left parties, which also did very well in the election. So in other words, the Dutch prime minister broke her promise. Campaigned on restricting immigration. Now they're loosening it up. This story came down the other day, and I didn't report the first part of it because I didn't think it was that. It was your typical boneheaded school decision. But here's the backstory on this. There is a district in Pennsylvania, school district, and they had actually sent warning letters to parents who were arrears on their school lunch bills that their children could end up in foster care. Big, scary story, big, scary possibility. You haven't paid for your kids' sandwiches, so we're going to take your kid away and put him in foster care. That was what the school district was saying. Well, Todd Carmichael, chief executive and co-founder of Philadelphia-based La Colombe Coffee, said that he offered to give the school district, Wyoming Valley West School District, $22,000 that would have erased the bills. Brought all the lunch accounts up to date, but school board president Joseph Mazur rejected the offer. And apparently Carmichael's spokesman Aaron Plett said Tuesday, Missouri argued that the money is owed by the parents who can afford to pay. So the position of Mr. Carmichael, irrespective of affluence, irrespective of need, he just wants to wipe away the debt. Now, that was a very generous thing for him to do. And I think this, the school board is just being ridiculous in saying, no, it's the parents' debts and they'll pay it or we'll take their kids away. Look, if the bill gets paid, the bill gets paid. Over in Arkansas, they have passed a new law that reforms their previous asset forfeiture law. Okay. And basically, it now prohibits the state from taking a person's property without a criminal conviction. And Arkansas has already taken a step to shut a loophole that would allow state and local police to circumvent the more stringent state asset forfeit process by passing cases off to the federal government. Well, it's about time somebody did something about that, because it's just gotten out of control, policing for profit. So, okay, apparently Netflix is in serious trouble. Apparently their programming has swung extremely liberal. That's alienated a lot of their audiences. The recent hike in prices didn't help either. But apparently people are unsubscribing and Netflix is in serious, serious trouble. All right, getting into the realm of political correctness and this gender nonsense. This is a story that came out of stationgossip.com, and it has to do with this transgender lesbian man. In other words, this is a biological man who identifies as a woman but as a lesbian, so he still likes girls. I mean, I used to joke about that I was actually a lesbian trapped in a man's body. But this guy is saying it for real. He is now trying to promote a program around the public swimming pools in his town to allow topless pool parties for teenage girls and no parents to be allowed. And he's got this long and convoluted rationale about allowing the girls, to be free in their own identity and blah, blah, blah. I think he's just a dirty old man. All right, getting on to computers. Boy, I ran out of talking points very early today. Online services that claim to anonymize your user personal data aren't as secure as we think, according to researchers who found that over 99% of people can be identified from a handful of supposedly anonymous data points. And doubters will be quickly silenced with the online tool the researchers developed to accompany their paper published in Nature Communications yesterday. Using just 3 commonly requested demographic attributes: birth date, zip code, and gender, the program was able to successfully identify users about 83% of the time. And with 5 or more data points, the machine learning model gets it right over 99% of the time. That's a little scary. Okay. Project Veritas has come out with another winner. They got a senior Google engineer who went public on camera, and he's saying big tech has become dangerous, and they are taking sides. They are using their influence on the American people. So I don't know that he's going to keep his job much longer here. Meanwhile, the new intelligence authorization bill criminalizes whistleblowers and reporters. And one well-known whistleblower, Kyriakou, in an interview with Russia Today, says this bill is going to protect CIA agents who commit war crimes. And that's absolutely right. This is removing the last bit of oversight over the intelligence agencies. So they can go on out there and say, you can't talk about it. It's national security. I mean, at least in Britain, it's done on a case-by-case basis with a D notice. But this is just a blanket act that says all whistleblowers, you know, you're gonna go to jail. And basically, they're saying, okay. This bill basically makes it a criminal offense to disclose the identities of covert officers. And I understand the need to protect the identities of the covert officers up to the point where they're operating contrary to the interests of the nation. They're committing war crimes. So, anyway. Well, it looks like finally somebody's going to try and do something about big tech. And apparently the Department of Justice yesterday announced it's opening a review into whether the United States' biggest and most powerful technology companies have stifled competition or hurt consumers. So the federal agency's antitrust division said in a statement that the sweeping inquiry will evaluate whether and how market-leading online platforms have achieved market power and are engaging in practices that have reduced competition, stifled innovation, or otherwise harmed consumers. Obviously, censorship being that last one. Further, the Department of Justice stated it will consider the widespread concerns that consumers, businesses, and entrepreneurs have expressed about search, social media, and some retail services online. So hopefully we'll see something useful out of that. And by the way, as a footnote, YouTube has banned Ryan Dawson again. So I would consider that to be harm. All right. Now, you've probably seen all these commercials for do-it-yourself home DNA testing kits. And it turns out that 23andMe Incorporated has for years used saliva to tell millions of consumers how closely related they are to this or that pope. And whether they are likely to develop diseases like diabetes or Alzheimer's. Now it's gone into a bigger ambition, drug development. For the past year, 23andMe has been sharing its huge trove of genetic data with GlaxoSmithKline, which took a $300 million stake in the company last summer. That collaboration has so far produced 6 potential drug targets, and the companies expect to start human trials on at least one candidate drug next year. But it also raises ethical questions about using people's genetic data to create profitable drugs. But that's apparently what they are doing. Okay. Getting on back to Bernie Sanders, he's fighting for a $15 minimum wage, but he doesn't pay his staffers $15 an hour. And apparently he's now in trouble for that one here. Getting on back to the Mueller investigation, Donald Trump is still out there with his reactions to the hearing. And he's very clearly feeling vindicated. But Representative Gohmert asked Mueller, did you know that Strzok hated Trump? Mueller said no, not at the time I hired him, but when I found out later I had him reassigned in the FBI. Jim Jordan ripped Mueller for passing on questions, refusing to answer them here. So, let's see. And here we go. Chris Wallace has come on out saying Mueller's testimony has been a disaster for Democrats. Mueller at one point said that he was not familiar with Fusion GPS. Okay, we've got going to take a commercial break here. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here to Murr in Wisconsin. Aloha, Murr. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, I didn't know Go Ogle, had to use algorithms. I didn't even know he had rhythm.
Well, somebody made an interesting little comment.
Rhythm.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I've got daisies in green pastures. That's another verse in there, right? That's even better. And that fits in with the Netflix. Let all the town muddy fall flat broke and be able to think for yourself.
Well, one of the people who was talking about, Google influencing and blacklisting people, and of course, the CEOs of these companies are saying, no, we're not doing it. And somebody said, these algorithms don't write themselves. That's absolutely true.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and this fellow stepping forward, Dave Coppola, whatever, very good. He started 2014, everything was hunky-dory, gets up to election time, and poof. So, it's
okay.
Pretty unfair there.
All right. Well, Murr, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to David. And I don't have a city that you're calling from, so welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, I'm out in cyberspace, Mike. I wanted to make a quick announcement. We have the mirror archive of the audio show on crucialnonsense.com at wrh.crucialnonsense.com. And periodically, I have to archive that stuff off because disk space is a premium. So if you guys want to get anything from the beginning of the year through till July, try to get it in the next few days, because this weekend I'm going to take those old files off. They'll still be available upon request. You can always send me an email and say, hey, I want this show, because I'm not going to throw any of these away. Anyway, the reason I wanted to call in here and talk to you is because you mentioned the Raspberry Pi again yesterday, and the Raspberry Pi 4. In fact, I appreciate you covering this stuff, because I was blissfully unaware that the Raspberry Pi was out, and when you mentioned it some time ago, that was the first mention. I mean, you were right on top of it, and you're always, pretty on top of these kind of things. And you mentioned the heating problem, but I'm going to go into my little dissertation about the Raspberry Pi, because you guys really probably ought to wait for a little bit for getting into this. It's very tasty. I think it's going to work out really well, but there's a lot of sellers out there that are trying to gouge people. I was looking on Amazon to be able to purchase this thing as soon as you said something about it, and it took a week for it to pop up, and it was $200. And we all know from what we can go to the Raspberry Pi website and see that the 4 gig model should only be $55. So you got to be really wary about these sellers out there. Go to the main official Raspberry Pi website and check that stuff out. And make sure that you're not.
There are actually scalpers for the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, because there's a lot of demand for the new stuff, and with stuff this bleeding edge new, it's probably best to wait, because not all the software is going to work right yet, because you have to upgrade absolutely everything. The old Raspbian 9 stretch, it doesn't work on this. It is only from 10 forward, and 10 is a brand new Debian release, and they don't have all the bugs worked out of that yet. So we are absolutely bleeding edge with this, so be careful. I'm going to be getting one of these here in the next couple of weeks, and I will give you guys a full report on everything that I find out about this. But heating is definitely an issue because a lot of people are very tempted to overclock these little bad boys, and you can do it, but you need to cool them. And even with my Raspberry Pi 3, I've got a fan blowing on those things. The cases for the Raspberry Pi 3s and 2s will not work for the 4 because they've completely redesigned the board. The Ethernet port and the USB ports are swapped, so it's not going to even fit into any of those cases. There's plenty of cases out there already for sale that have open sides and have cooling fans built into the top of them and plug right into the GPIO port. And even if you've got a retrofit, one of yours, there's, $2, $3, $4 5-volt fans that you can hook up to the GPIO port and keep those Raspberry Pis cool. And most of the kits will come with heat sinks, and I wouldn't install them until you know what case solution you're going to have to make sure that they fit. Definitely go with the heat sinks and definitely go with the fan, even if you're using a Raspberry Pi 3, because they'll last longer if you keep them cool. Yes, they will probably continue to run for a couple of years if you really abuse them, but why not take care of them? They're kind of a neat little thing. One of these days, look at all the software stuff sorted on this thing, and there'll be more options just than the Raspbian. You'll probably even be able to put Windows 10 on the darn thing. I don't know why the hell you'd want to ruin the thing.
I was just going to say, why?
Insanity. That's why. Because we're all insane in the brain. But
well, this little portable broadcasting setup that we're working on here, that's running on a Windows 10 machine. And that's half of the pain I'm going through is working around Windows 10.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely awful. And it's not just Windows 10. All these corporations are doing the same thing. They keep moving the goalposts on us. They change things with YouTube. They change things with Google. And they make us so dependent on this stuff that they've absolutely wrecked our lives. We spend our entire existence trying to service them. And that's not fair. Anyway, that's all I got. Aloha to you, Mike.
All right. Aloha. I was hoping you were going to stay on for a little longer, but we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with David. We're talking about the Raspberry Pi 4 and how he's going to get one. I have 2 Raspberries, a Pi Zero, which is very, very weak, but it's also very, very tiny. And I've got a Pi 3. And I haven't decided yet if those are going to get sold before we move to Indiana. They don't take up a lot of room, but I haven't had a lot of time to work with them, other than get the desktop up and get some stuff loaded from the Free Software Foundation to, to sort of get them up and running. But there are some very cool things people are doing with the Raspberries, and you can do a web search about it. I've even seen people who've made their own cell phones with Legos and the Raspberry Pi, which is always going to get a stare going through TSA. But anyway, David, you said you had forgotten to mention the different connectors anyway on the Pi 4.
Yeah, I was remiss in that, because another thing you'll have to be aware of when you get into the Raspberry Pi 4 is you don't have that big normal HDMI connector anymore, but you have 2 micro HDMI, and the adapterlators are pretty cheap for that, so it's not a big deal. But if you buy it and you expect you're going to be able to hook it up like your Raspberry Pi 3, you're going to go, wait a minute here, and you're going to be in for a rude awakening. And the power supply is using a USB-C power supply, which is a different plug entirely. And there's adaptators for that as well. But it also supplies more amperage on that. And that's why they went to that. So that kind of makes sense. Oh, yeah, there's about 1,000 really cool projects. One of the ones I want to do when I get some time is make an RGB laser vector graphics projector. Because I saw somebody on YouTube put one of those things together, and they were playing the old vector games like Asteroids on the 13-foot wall. And I'm like, oh, I want to do that. It's really neat what you can do. I haven't had this much fun with a computer since the old Commodore days.
That was my first reaction when I got the Raspberry Pi, is it brought back the fun of working with computers, and of course remembering how big computers were when I was first starting out. I look at these little tiny things and I'm just in awe of what they've packed into these things.
Oh, absolutely. And I was looking at a modification to put an external antenna for the Wi-Fi on that thing. And you about have to see a microscope to I get the lowdown on the components you've got to move. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that. I mean, I don't have a soldering iron that's made for those 2-inch tall fabrication gnomes. My goodness, it is impressive. I did a little research when you were talking about Raspberry Pis a couple months ago, and the Raspberry Pis before the 4 came out, the Raspberry Pi 3 Plus was a bigger, faster computer, computing-wise, than what they had with the Cray YMP 30 years ago. So, yeah, that's how far it's come, because that was a big, gigantic, liquid-cooled monstrosity. Yes, it was the fastest computer in the world at the time. But
yes.
If we had a time machine, we went back 30 years with that Raspberry Pi 4, they would just absolutely pass out and think we were aliens or something.
No, I remember the Cray that they had at Digital Productions, which was one of the early computer animation houses in Hollywood, and I remember up at Ames Research getting a chance to work with a Cray 2. But yeah, our modern little desktop machines, they're very powerful compared to those early days. And I'm wondering if somebody is going to take some raspberries and literally gang them together to make a super powerful processor.
It's been done. There's places out there that have made these special cases where you build your Raspberry Pi clusters, and people have put 20 or 30 or 100 of them together to make a big, massive, very distributed cluster. And it's very viable. And I'm excited to see what the Raspberry Pi 4 can do. The memory is going to be a big thing for me, because one of the uses I have for these little Raspberry Pi computers is building phone switches off of it to run your phone system. I mean, why not? It makes sense. It runs on 5 volts. It doesn't take much power. It runs off your battery backup forever. So the core services for your network that you can farm off of these Raspberry Pi computers, it'll make your power outage a whole lot less pleasant, or more pleasant rather, that your Wi-Fi still works. These things aren't taking up as much power, and you can power them off a standard UPS for hours as opposed to minutes. It's a big difference.
Well, one of the things I was toying around with, and then I got to let you go because we got another caller waiting on the line, was to actually implement some of these encryption programs that I've made into these little Raspberries, and just put them, hooked up with a terminal and whatnot, and just have these little portable encryption systems to get around all of this mandated backdoor stuff. Anyway, listen, David, thank you very much for the information. I'm a big fan of the Raspberry Pis myself. You and I guess, are going to be talking on Friday. And hopefully this little portable system is going to work the way that it's supposed to work. So thanks a lot. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Raspberry Pi and SLI. Remember the SLI days? That was 3DFX when you can run 2 cards, and that'd be great if you can link all those computers in together and make one more powerful computer, especially if you can link them together over the internet. Somehow, like cloud,
Well,
eventually.
Back when we were working for Square USA, and we sort of did this as a stunt for SIGGRAPH. We basically took, I think it was 32 motherboards from a popular gaming system. I forget which one it was, but we racked them all together, and we wrote it to render a scene from the movie we were working on, Final Fantasy, in real time. And you could just sit there with a mouse and twiddle all the adjustments, making the person's skin shiny, sweaty, dry, whatever. And of course, the hair was moving in real time, and it was a very powerful little gizmo.
What do you think of all the ray tracing now, Mike? Like how it's coming out in the mainstream gaming now? Which is amazing, because ray tracing it's very hard on graphics cards back in the day.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, it depends on how you optimize it. I mean, a lot of it's done with bounding boxes, and a lot of it is done with environment mapping. So that's how they're able to get that kind of speed out of it.
And real quick, before I switch over to Trump, I just want to say, with the Raspberry Pi 4, I know they added a gigabit LAN, and they got the 2 4K 60 micro HDMIs, but the problem is that makes the chip run hotter too when you run that. That's why it needs a good cooling on it. Otherwise, it doesn't overheat, it'll throttle. And, you know, you don't want anything to really throttle.
No.
You know, because you want it to run at the speed. I think it's 1.5. I think, what did the Raspberry Pi 3 run at? Like 1.25 or something like that.
Something like that.
I don't remember.
It's been a while since I've looked at it.
Yeah, it's a nice kit. When you get it, though, everybody, get the 4 gig kit. I mean, the more RAM, the better. You know, I mean, for the price, you know, $55 is, you know, it's not bad price at all for something like that. And don't pay $200, obviously. you can buy a big computer for that, kind of, you know. But yeah, Mike, on Trump, you know what killed MAGA was putting Bolton, Pompeo, and Haspel in. That's what killed. That's what turned it going from Make America Great Again to make the empire even bigger. You know what I mean? Like that's what these people believe in. That not American accept. They believe in like empire.
Yes.
They don't like Bill Kristol and all these. They don't love America. They love this power infrastructure we have. You know, there's a different. You know, that's what killed it. Besides Trump,
35 is all they got.
Yeah, 35, no wall. The wars continue. The budget thing he passed with the Democrats to keep the government funded. You know, the debt. It's like I said before, because I haven't called in a couple of days, it just nothing has changed with him. You know, the empire continues. You know, and this show today with Mueller. I mean, the guy is corrupt.
Yes.
That's it. You know, he went along with the Iraq lie, also 9/11 covering up for the Saudis, and he's part of the elite, you know. And yeah, he stumbled around today because that's what these people are. They're bumblers and stumblers. You know, these people are not like bright, but they have men with guns to protect them. You know.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think, you know, that they're not very bright. They're just willing to do things other people are not willing to do, and that's why they're able to get into positions of power. Yeah, and like you said, it doesn't matter if Trump gets in or not. The decline will continue. Because if everybody goes to watch that Rick Sanchez on RT, he had a thing about China and America and like how many top banks in the world, and like the first 6 are from China now. Yes,
everything's moved over there. Like the manufacturing, the banking system. There's nothing left here. We're a shell of our former self, and it's not coming back. Because I know people hate me when I say that, because we had our day in the sun, just like the British did, the Romans and the French and all that, and those days are gone. That's why we're all stumbling now, like with this Russia collusion crap and this. Things go on, dragging on. You know, this is all we got left, people. You know, at this point, you know. But that's all I got to say, Mike. Have a good show. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I could use a few phone calls here. Okay, so a lot of people still talking about Robert Mueller's testimony. And interesting little story, this one coming from Political Insider, basically saying that already the House Democrats have been caught pushing fake news about this morning's hearings. And everybody wanted this to reinforce their position. The bottom line is this really didn't change anybody's mind. The people who think Trump is guilty of something, that he must be guilty of something, they're still going to go on believing that. The people who are saying this is a witch hunt, they're pretty much going on with that as well. This really did not change the minds at all. Okay, now there's a new documentary out from Max van der Werf, the leading independent investigator of the Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 disaster, and it has revealed breakthrough evidence of tampering and forging of prosecution materials, suppression of Ukrainian Air Force radar tapes, and lying by the Dutch, Ukrainian, US, and Australian governments. An attempt by agents of the US FBI to take possession of the black boxes of the downed aircraft was also revealed by a Malaysian National Security Council official for the first time. So more and more is coming out about that as well. Okay. Let's see.
more about the Mueller report. Alan Dershowitz is already out there, and he responded to the fact that Mueller didn't really seem to know his own report all that well. And Dershowitz is saying it's pretty obvious he didn't write this. It was written for him. He just signed his name on it and sent it on forward. Okay, so anyway, somebody's chastising me, my seeming fervor for Trump. I don't think I have fervor for Trump. He's been a tremendous disappointment, but I do believe in saving the system and playing by the rules. And no, Trump is a disappointment. I have no fervor for him. I have a fervor, if you want to talk about fervorness. I have a fervor for the United States of America and the Constitution and the American people. That's where my fervor is coming from here. Okay, Chuck Todd on the Mueller testimony. Complete failure. Dems can't combat rights propaganda machine. So, yep. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Now that, the left wing or people are starting to say that Mueller didn't even write this report, he just basically put his name to it, they're going to want a do-over.
Yep.
And this time they're going to spend twice as much.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right.
So that'll carry Donald Trump right through to, 2021 or 22? So basically, the United States politicians, the senators and the Congress people, are basically showing the rest of America that they don't really need these people to do anything. Because if they're only going after Trump, who's doing everything else?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's getting, passed, and it's actually, the question is, what are we being distracted from? What are they working on that's not being reported? And obviously, these laws to outlaw BDS is one. The laws to give more money to the military, the new law to make it to outlaw whistleblowing and reporters. There's a lot of stuff that's being done. And I think if the American people knew about it, they'd be upset. But instead, we have the Robert Mueller, Donald Trump circus out there.
Yeah. So basically, the vice is getting tighter. It just keeps getting tighter,
yes,
tighter, and tighter. And freedom and liberty is being squeezed out.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yep. Even though, there's supposed to be some looking into these quote-unquote tech companies. Mike, they're not tech companies. They got a website, and they got a server farm, a bunch of hard drives, with a few CPUs. It's not a tech company. They don't really, push anything forward other than silly values and whatever else people are looking for.
Well, I don't know. Google does a lot of R&D.
Individuality is lost.
Yeah, well, definitely that's been part of it. Anyway, listen, Al, we got to take a break here. Do you want to stay on the line?
No, I'm good. Thanks a lot for your time.
Well, we'll be back in a few minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right back to the phones here to Jim in Northwest Indiana. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I've been listening to you for a long time. You do a great job.
Thank you.
Looking forward to you coming to Indiana and welcoming you ahead of time. And I have a question. I used to listen to John Stadtmiller a lot when I had the evening time, and a guy on named Robbie. I don't know if you recall, they were doing a show about precious metals and the economy and things like that.
Yes.
They used to always talk about that China's buying our debt. And one day they'll call the debt. And I'm wondering, with all the conflict we have with China, haven't they made that threat? Or how come no one's made it known that China can just demand payment because they keep buying our debt. Now, they may not be buying it anymore, but I don't know if you've heard anything about that.
Well, no, what they're doing is they're dumping their treasury bonds. And the idea of a treasury bond is it has, I guess you could call it a lifespan, where you can't redeem it before then. There are 3-year bonds and 5-year bonds and 20-year bonds. And China's been buying up a lot of these bonds, but they're not due yet. But what China can do is dump the bonds on the market, which reduces their value. And apparently both China and Russia are already starting to do that.
Oh, that's a great answer. Yeah, hadn't thought of that.
Okay.
So do you see that coming, or do you think this trade battle is going to go on, and what may happen?
I think the trade battle is going to go on until somebody realizes they could lose their economy over it, and I think that's going to be the United States. The problem is Donald Trump. He doesn't seem to be thinking these things through, and it's like with Iran. He says one thing one day and something else the next day, and I think that's the way he's handling all of these sanctions on. Now they're talking sanctions on Turkey, sanctions on China. I just think he goes for the soundbite, and there doesn't seem to be a cogent, well thought out policy behind all of this.
Okay, well, thank you, Michael, for answering my questions and giving me some insight into that.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call, soon to be neighbor Jim. And we're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. All right. Now, interestingly enough, as you know, we just went through the anniversary of the landing of Apollo 11 on the moon. And 2 of the 3 astronauts are still alive. Michael Collins is still alive. Buzz Aldrin is still alive. Neil Armstrong basically passed away back in 2012 at Mercy Health Fairfield Hospital. And he had undergone bypass surgery in the facility. And apparently he went through the surgery very well. Armstrong's wife, Carol, told AP that he was amazingly resilient and could walk. Apparently, when nurses removed wires from his temporary pacemaker, Armstrong started bleeding into the pericardium, which is the membrane surrounding the heart, which led to a cascade of problems, which led to his death. So remember what we said before. John Hopkins says medical mistakes, 3rd leading cause of death, and it happened here. More about this story after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the passing of Neil Armstrong, and he basically died from a medical mistake. And right now, medical mistakes are the 3rd leading cause of death. So apparently, the family of Neil Armstrong finally received a $6 million payout from the hospital where he died. And it did strike me as odd the way he passed. And he was an interesting gentleman. He was a very cool gentleman. I got to meet him, believe it or not, at Hanna-Barbera, the animation house. And let's see, I need to forward this to our board op technical comment. Okay. So anyway, I was working at Hanna-Barbera. We were developing the world's first digital ink and paint system, and it cost a bloody fortune. It was being developed on VAX 11780s. Then, of course, next year the Macintosh came out and the whole project was trashed. But while we're there, we had these Grinnell frame buffers, and we had all these prefab materials, including lunar dust, which seemed a little pretentious. But Armstrong, very low key, seemed a little lost. Like, what do you do after you've been the first man on the moon? And then I saw this TV show a while back on the Educational Channel where apparently Armstrong was part of an expedition that went looking for these legendary metal leaves from a book. And it was in this network of caves that look like they're architectural. It turns out it's a natural formation. But Armstrong just went in there a very long distance, and when the TV show went in to duplicate that, they took along Armstrong's daughter, so she got to stand at the same spot, get her picture taken where Daddy stood the years before. So still the adventurer, and he absolutely did not want the fame that Buzz Aldrin sought, and Buzz Aldrin liked it a lot. But Armstrong wanted people to remember the Neil Armstrong that walked on the moon. He didn't want to be this aging personality that was, struggling to relive the moments of glory. Michael Collins was that way as well. And Buzz Aldrin went the other way. I loved it when he punched out that guy who said that the moon landings were faked. And back on the 20th, that guy was back again saying, I have proof it was all a fake. Paging Mr. Aldrin. Pick up your brass knuckles. Anyway. All right, so let's see. What have we got here that we can talk about? And we were talking earlier about Project Veritas and how one of their senior engineers had gone public saying that, there is a bias in Google. Well, apparently Google, which owns YouTube now, has now censored the Project Veritas video. You will not look at it. You will not see it. So, Google employees label notable conservatives Dennis Prager, Jordan Peterson, and others as Nazis in latest malicious smear stemming from left-wing bias. Nazis, Nazis, Nazis. Is that all anybody knows? Or a racist? That's it. It seems to be the only two words that the leftists know. You're either a Nazi or you're a racist. Pretty amazing. Okay, let's see. Keep on down here. All right. All right, there's been a pushback against Ted Cruz's Antifa are terrorist resolution, and he's being accused of attempting to stifle the left. Now, first of all, Antifa are violent, and violence is never justified whether you're left, right, up, down, center, basement, whatever. So there's this resolution introduced by Senators Ted Cruz and Bill Cassidy to label Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. It is a desperate attempt by the far right to depict the radical left as doing what the far right itself is actually guilty of: sustained murderous violence with deliberate blah, blah, blah. In other words, this is the opposition piece. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, so getting on in here. By the way, for those of you interested, SIGGRAPH is coming up very shortly. SIGGRAPH stands for Special Interest Group Graphics. It's one of the largest special interest groups in the ACM, which is the Association of Computing Machinery. And obviously it's got the sizzle and glamour factor because of all the movies that get made with computers. And boy, I remember all the way back, 1980s. Going to SIGGRAPH here. All right, so let's get some phone calls in here. 800-313-9443. Okay. Apparently, NATO is getting ready to resume air patrols of Icelandic airspace. And they're doing them with U.S. Air Force jets and 110 personnel on the ground, backed up by staff at NATO headquarters in Udom, Germany. At the same time, it's been announced that the U.S. military and NATO intend to invest a combined 14 billion kroner in maintaining and improving defense infrastructure in Iceland. Well, if we really do go to war with Russia, those sea lanes of communication across the Atlantic are going to become very, very important. If you have ever read the Tom Clancy book, Red Storm Rising, they talk about this in a very, very great deal. The strategic importance of the unsinkable battleship Iceland, just like we have the unsinkable battleship Hawaii out here. So, anyway, let's see. Already talked about that. Somebody actually sent me an article on that Nadler gerrymandering. It had a map, and yeah, it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird. Okay, we have a call on the line. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. What's his name? Dershowitz is right. The guy probably didn't sign it. He was just a figurehead.
Yes.
Mueller was just a figurehead. That's why all the time this was going on, he never gave a press conference. You never heard him speak at all. You know.
Yep.
He was just sitting there doing nothing. He is a little bit, and other people have said this that are familiar with the whole legal profession and all that. They know each other. Lawyers know each other. Have said the guy is past his prime. He's not, to put it charitably, he's past his prime, and they hired him to be. They couldn't hire Andrew Weissman to do it because this guy that would be too obviously biased, and it was obviously biased anyway. But they put Mueller in there to just sit there and do nothing, and Weissman was the guy apparently that was running the whole show, or somebody was running the whole show. Now,
well, I mean, there was Mueller's deputy prosecutor. I'm blanking on the name. I mean, he got let go partway through.
Right. What people are saying is Weissman was running it. I don't know, but they're going to talk to his aides. I think tomorrow, right? They're going to in closed session. They're going to talk to Weissman.
That's where all the interesting stuff is going to come out.
That's where the interesting stuff would come out. Yeah, some of the Republicans got in some good zingers against Mueller, but Mueller was just sitting there. It's like beating up an old man that some punch drunk boxer that can't fight anymore, and he just pummeled him. Mueller was lost. You could tell. I saw a little bit of it because I was I was actually in the gym. There was a TV on there. I was on the machine. And, a lawyer has to be able to read real fast. That's what it's all about. He can look at a piece of paper, figure it out. Mueller couldn't read anything. I mean, they asked him, he couldn't even see what page, the guy said it's at the bottom of page 2. And Mueller couldn't find it. He couldn't find anything. So the guy's a figurehead, was just sitting there. And he signed his name a few times, and that was it. He didn't know what was going on. But I'd like to see. I don't know why Weissman has to be in closed session. That would be the interesting thing, where he actually will say some stuff.
Yeah, I don't know why they're there has to be a closed session. I mean, this is a matter of public interest, but it's very obvious today's hearings were for public show and was pretty much scripted. And tomorrow in closed session is where members of Congress are going to ask the real nitty-gritty questions. And anything embarrassing that comes on out will never be told.
Yeah. I don't know. They can leak that. There's no reason they can't leak that stuff. Is close. They leak everything.
Yeah, that would be nice.
But, yeah, the Jerrold, I couldn't, I couldn't watch the whole thing. But you can turn on something like Gateway Pundit or even YouTube, and they'll tell the zingers. Like Louis Gohmert was pretty good. These guys are really are lawyers and love the legal profession. Gohmert and Ratcliffe, and they just told this guy, hey, you're an embarrassment to the whole legal profession, because the whole thing is in America you're either innocent or you're either guilty or not guilty. This deal about I can't exonerate him, that is not to be found anywhere in the Justice Department.
No, it isn't.
Ratcliffe was.
It isn't. I mean, Mueller was directly challenged on that. Has this ever been used before by the Department of Justice? And he couldn't think of a single occurrence. It was just made up to put on this report so that they could still go on thinking Trump had to be guilty of something and justify all the money and all the time that was spent on this witch hunt.
And Ratcliffe said, you're right that Trump's not above the law, but you're treating him like he's not below the law either. You're treating him like he's below the law. You can say that about anybody. And one of the other guys said that you can say that about anybody, that he's not exonerated. Michael Rivero is not exonerated.
Nope.
Adam Schiff is not exonerated.
Nope.
Nobody's exonerated because that's not part of our legal system. There's no exonerating. That's another word they made up for this special occasion, like collusion. Collusion was something they made up originally.
Well, yeah, again, there was no there. Anyway, listen, Don, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Al in West Virginia. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good, Mike. Hey, I noticed a lot of people have been talking about, well, I don't know about your shows there because I've been on and off. I had to go to the garage, but a lot of other stuff that I listened to this morning when they had the hearing, it was saying, oh, well, he looks like he's incoherent or he's having a problem. He's shaking. He's kind of, getting old. Maybe he's just an old man and can't remember things. But no, what he's doing is he's a professional. He's playing them. He's running out that 5 minutes that they have. Every time he asks a question, that takes off their 5 minutes for asking them questions. He's playing them like a fiddle is exactly what's going on. And if you ever notice, too, that everything that they asked him, they would always mention, is it legal? Is it legal? You never heard once, I don't think, anyways. I didn't get to listen to the whole thing. But I never heard once when I was listening to it, did they ever say, is it lawful? There's a big difference in lawful and legal.
Yep. Well, I didn't get to watch the whole thing. I watched some of it. Yeah, if he was putting on an act, it was a good one because he did come across as being slightly befuddled. And of course, if he is showing his age, that may also explain why he refused to give interviews and press appearances for the last 2 years because, he's not there anymore. And, at some point, you reach an age
if he's not there,
your brain starts shutting down. And
if he's not there,
it ain't fun.
He done a daggone good job of stalling around for somebody that's not there. Because, like I said, everybody got 5 minutes. He was doing a good job of stalling around and taking up their time.
Well, it's possible. I would almost want to go back and watch a tape recording of it. But in any event, the subtotal of it is that the Democrats came out the losers on this. And it just reinforced the fact there never was a Russiagate story. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, it didn't change anybody's mind about what's been going on.
Well, I agree with you there that they probably come out on the lower end, even though I'm not I don't have no love lost for the Democrats at all. I do think that some of them pulled out some pretty good points there that kind of put him on the point, on the stand, on the needle's edge. But the thing of it is, overall, I do believe that the Democrats kind of they took one step forward, but they went about 6 steps back. So, but I just wanted to throw that out there that I think, my personal opinion is, because I've seen this happen too many times with these politicians, in which he's up high enough grade now that that's what he was, basically, as a politician, and even though he started at the bottom, they pulled a lot of the same stunts, just like Bill Clinton's, what's the definition of this, or what's the definition of that? He stalled around until their minutes was up. But, like I said, the other very important thing to think about is everything they mentioned, is it legal? Is it legal? Is it legal? That's because we're dealing with a legal entity. We're dealing with a corporation. Everything's legal because it's all a fiction. They don't say nothing about lawful. It's all legal. And that's something for people to start thinking about right there. And that's all I have to say. I'll let you go, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to start with Daniel in British Columbia. And Daniel, I'm probably going to have to take you over the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Michael. Yeah, I wanted to touch base with you on a topic that kind of got lost. It was on the front pages a few weeks back, and then next thing you know, everyone forgets about it. And this was Megan Rapinoe. She was the U.S. women's captain for the soccer team. And I don't know, it just seemed like the whole scenario was kind of written by Edward Bernays, the way she comes out as this victim. All of a sudden, just because she, calls out the president, has this big Twitter fight with him. And then it goes into the whole, her screaming about how they don't get equal pay, like the men's soccer team does. And then she goes and mentions the fact that she's asking her fans, she says, we need more fans. We need more season tickets sold.
Okay,
Daniel. We need more merchandise.
Daniel, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here to Daniel in British Columbia. We're talking about the U.S. women's soccer team and its captain. And the part that bothered me about the story is that, in my opinion, when you are on a sports team, a national sports team, you are the public face of the country and its people. You are representing the nation to the rest of the world. And if you behave badly and childishly, it reflects poorly on all of us.
Yeah, that's an understatement for sure. I mean, the whole crowd was chanting F Trump over and over. And she's just a poor role model for young girls. I'm not going to mention it seemed like the LGBTQ agenda was out in full force too.
Yes.
And the city of New York put on a ticker tape parade, and they did in 2015 when they won, and only a few thousand people showed up. This time they said, 2 million people showed up. I didn't see 2 million people. Another thing that Megan Rapinoe goes on Twitter and she's saying, we need more fans, we need more season tickets sold and more merchandise sold. So, and then she complains that she doesn't get paid the same that men do. It's obvious she doesn't have a degree in economics. I mean, nobody watches women's soccer, and if they did more, then they'd get paid more.
Yes.
So that whole women are unequal, and it just seems like this whole script was just pre-written, and I don't know. I just think pretty soon you'll start to see, she'll get replaced by a transgender. And then that's when I'll start to watch, because it'll be kind of funny. I like seeing this snake eating its own tail. So I don't know. I just had to. I know you're looking for phone calls. So this was
Well,
something
no,
I had
actually,
on the
I've got
back
a lot of
burner.
phone calls right now, and I need to get
Okay.
to them. So,
Sure. I'll leave you with that.
all right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. Let's switch over to Bruce in Texas. Aloha, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, hello, Michael. Hey, I noticed you mentioned the Tom Clancy book earlier. Did you read Rainbow Six?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I got something that's kind of like a personal conspiracy theory, quote unquote. I don't even like using that term or what the hell else to use. But I'm sure, you know, it's been 18 years now, so I'll go real quick, try to bring up the name here. Ahmed Shah Massoud, who was the leader of the Northern Alliance.
Yes.
In the fight against the Soviets. And he was on the CIA payroll. He was heavily supported by the CIA. And he's celebrated as a hero in Afghanistan to this day. And he was very intelligent, he was very charismatic, and he was very independent. He wasn't corruptible, in other words. And 2 days before 9/11, supposedly he was killed by Al Jazeera news crew who had allegedly a bomb in a battery pack of their camera. And so the story that we're supposed to believe is that and Al-Qaeda, which we know right now is a fabrication, basically, an Al-Qaeda sympathizer or agent infiltrated Al Jazeera to assassinate Ahmed Shah Massoud before 9/11. Now, in Rainbow Six, in that book, I recall reading Tom Clancy had a lot of inside information on the military and on advanced weaponry.
Yes.
He mentions an assassination drone strike with a bomb that doesn't leave any metal fragments, basically like a fiberglass bomb that's guided
Actually,
into the
it's
target
paper.
silently.
It's paper. It's a paper case.
Yeah, cellulose. I believe that's how they killed Ahmed Shah Massoud, to get him out of the way before the 9/11 false flag occurred. What do you think?
It's entirely possible, and I don't know that it necessarily relates to 9/11. They certainly had ample reason to want to take him out anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's toss that at you. And let the next caller come on. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Al called back. Apparently, you've got one more thing you want to talk to us about Mueller. Al dropped. Okay, let's go to Art from Off the Grid. Hello, Art, and I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about that, basically 2 congressional hearings this morning. And, you know, the whole thing, I watched both of them, and to be honest, there was nothing that came out in the 3 hours that I wasted. There was nothing came out that we didn't already know, first of all. Secondly, by my count, more than 50% of the time, he either would not make a comment or was going to refuse to answer the question, or in one case, he even wanted to refer to, I guess that was his attorney sitting next to him, and the congressman called him out and said, "No, I'm not asking him, I'm asking you." So this whole thing was a farce, and it came right down to, during the first hearing, one of the congressmen...
Art, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking to Art Off the Grid. We're talking about the Mueller hearings this morning. And, of course, going into the hearings, we had already been told by the Attorney General, by Mueller himself, that they were only going to answer questions about Mueller's report itself. And they weren't going to answer questions about anything else. And, of course, we already know about the Mueller report. We've already read it. Okay? What we want to know is who initiated this witch hunt. And that, of course, is probably what they're going to be talking about behind closed doors tomorrow.
Yeah, but the 2 things that really jumped out at me was, one, first of all, when he was asked about who was it that had appointed him Attorney General in Massachusetts, he thought it was Bush when it was Reagan.
Yeah.
If your memory's bad, you know, and 50%, that first of all is an indication right there. We might be dealing with memory issues. And then half the time he wasn't going to answer the question. I'll not answer that. I'll not get into that. Or I'll refuse to answer that. And then probably about maybe 1/5 of the time, he couldn't remember specific details of a report that he himself supposedly wrote. And then finally, when one of the congressmen right there at the end, I believe it was the first round with the House, when he said, when right there at the end, as the final closing statement was being made, someone spoke up, one of the congressmen spoke up, I want to make a point of order. And when recognized, he says, I need to know, was the intention of this hearing to get Mueller to recommend impeachment? Nobody wanted to touch that. Why? Because that's exactly what this was about. They were trying to get him to say, yes, I recommend impeachment, and that would have been absolute contrary to everything in the report.
Yep.
And that's what they were trying to get him to do. Pure and simple.
Okay. I hear your computer speaker in the background, or some speaker in the background. Anything else, Art?
Yeah. No, that was just, this has been just an absolute complete waste of time, a waste of taxpayer dollars. And as the one congressman said right there at the very end, hopefully this is the wrap-up of this and we can get on to doing more important things. And I think that's the right attitude. Enough is enough. And if you want to keep pushing this, then, well, why not go back and pick up where James Comey failed?
Yes.
And look at Clinton's. You really want justice? There you go. Let's look at the Clintons. Anyway, thanks, Mike. Have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Got an email here. This relates back to the U.S. women's soccer team. And Rapinoe seems unaware there is no I in team. And I remember hearing that when I was in high school as well. So, yeah, this morning's Mueller hearings were indeed a waste of time, waste of planetary oxygen. But again, going in, we knew that there were going to be no great revelations for two reasons. First of all, they said, we're not talking about anything but the report. And second, we knew that the report said that Trump didn't do anything. And it was rather embarrassing for Mueller to get up there and say, well, we can't exonerate him. And I'm glad that somebody called him on that and said, has the Department of Justice ever used that on anybody ever before? And Mueller couldn't recall any time that it had been. It's a reversal of the way things are supposed to work. You're either guilty or not guilty in this country. You're not exonerated. That's Code Napoleon. And that one caller we had may be correct. It may be that Robert Mueller was basically trying to run out the clock on all these people by stuttering and stammering and can't find the right page and the rest of it. It's almost worth going back and looking at a video of him. But, he's getting along in age. And when you get older, you start getting a blank spot on the old hard drive. Let's see, how old is he? Alrighty. Well, they're not giving his age here. Was the 6th director of the FBI from 2001. Oh, he's 74 years old. Oh, his birthday's next month, on August 7th. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Robert. Anyway. So, what are they going to talk about in the closed-door session tomorrow? Probably that is going to be where they ask the really important questions, the important questions that we, the people, wanted asked. Where did this all come from? Who initiated all of this nonsense? Who was it who came up with the idea of a sexed up phony dossier created by Fusion GPS to try and either blackmail Donald Trump or get visa warrants on him? There had to be a mastermind somewhere. I think we all know who that is. That's what we want to know. And, you know, Art was absolutely right. Let's go back to where James Comey fell flat on its face and start back in on the Clintons. Comey admitted Hillary Clinton committed felony violations of Title 18. Then he came on out and said, but she didn't mean to do wrong, so we've decided she should not be prosecuted, which, by the way, was not the FBI's job. The FBI doesn't make the decision whether or not to indict or prosecute. That's the Department of Justice. Now, Hillary's never had her day in court. Double jeopardy does not apply. She can still be indicted on those Title 18 charges. And she ought to be. And I'm still waiting for somebody over at the Internal Revenue Service to take a look at the Clinton Foundation and acknowledge it fails to meet the requirements of a 501c3. And if it were to lose that tax-exempt designation, then the Clintons become personally liable for the taxes on all that money. And boy, nothing hurts a rich person more than turning them into a poor person. I'd still like to see justice for Vince Foster. I know that's not going to happen. Anyway, it's been 27 years now since Vince Foster. Yeah. And I never expected to be at this long. I figured, you know, I'll go in, I'll say, here's the evidence of a crime. End of story, go back to work. Didn't happen that way. Anyway, I have a little announcement for the audience here, and that is that tomorrow's show will be a rebroadcast. Claire and I are celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. We're not quite there yet, but we decided we're going to hop over to Kauai starting tomorrow, because that's where we honeymooned 25 years ago. And I'm taking with me this little portable setup, and hopefully I'll be able to do the radio show from Kauai. So replay tomorrow, possible live show from Kauai on Friday. And it's the first field test of the system, so we'll see how it works. Anyway, we have a caller on the line. Al in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Al, are you there? Al, going once, twice. All right, well, so much for that one. Anyway, looking back over the last 25 years, it's been an education, because I now have a view of this government and the people in it that is certainly at odds with what I believed when I was younger. When I was young, innocent, and naive, I thought most people in government were good. I thought the FBI were the good guys, because that's what TV told me. Oh, okay, Al is here now. Al in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I didn't get beeped in, Mike. I could hear you, but I guess you couldn't hear me.
Nope.
Hey, spend that time tomorrow, man. Take it off with your wife and celebrate your extra honeymoon there. Don't worry about us. There's plenty going on around here. Hey, what I wanted to reason I called back was I don't know 100%, but from what I understand, that Hillary and Michelle Obama, is what they call her, him or whatever, was both patent attorneys. Now, do you know anything about that?
No. I'm sure in terms of Hillary, it had to be very early in her career, like maybe even before she joined the Rose Law Firm.
Well, so from what I heard or read about years ago, like I said, I don't know if this is factual or not. Both of them was patent attorneys, and they had exclusive pedigrees to be able to go into the government patents. In other words, if you create some kind of a super great missile or a weapon or whatever, and the government takes it over and they put it in their patents, they don't let you patent it.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. Secrets, in other words, for the government. And they could go in there and see what they were and do this and do that. That's what I understood. Maybe you could check into it and see if I'm wrong, but I can remember years ago that's the way that happened. And this was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 8, 10 years ago that I remember this. But, and supposedly she snuck out some stuff, actually got busted sneaking out some files from that patent office when she went in there, Hillary this is, and later on it was somehow traced down to where China wound up with the patents. About 2 years later, they wound up with creating the same thing that supposedly they shouldn't have had. But I don't know. You maybe you can check into it or something like that.
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and apparently, yes, Hillary Clinton was an intellectual property attorney while she was at the Rose Law Firm from 1977 to 1992. And, pardon me. So, yeah, I'm looking at this website, and there's apparently a lot of stuff that went on. So...
Yeah. Well, I also heard that the Michelle was too.
Okay.
But I don't know about that either 100%. I think I actually researched it, but it's been, a few years ago, before I had my stroke. So I'm pretty sure, though, I'm kind of remembering something like that. So you could check into that too. But anyhow, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I don't want to waste up your end of your show.
Okay, well, we're coming up to the end of the program here, and I'm looking here at stuff on Michelle Obama being a lawyer, but it doesn't say that she worked in patent law.
Okay,
she's a graduate of Princeton University and Harvard Law School. And early in her career, she worked at the law firm Sidley Austin, which is where she met Barack Obama. So, anyway, a lot of history there.
Really?
All right, so
that would have been, so what age would that have been? About in her teens?
No, because she had already graduated Harvard Law School, so I would say it would have to be mid-20s.
Well, that's kind of strange because I read some things and seen pictures of her and Barack Obama back when she was a young teenager together.
I don't know about that because when Barack Obama was a teenager, he was living here on Oahu.
Yeah. Well, he might not. I don't know how old she is compared to his age, but I do know that he was a young teenager whenever these pictures was taken, and I don't know how old I don't know what their age difference is.
Well, again, when Barack Obama was a teenager, he was here on the island of Oahu, and I seriously doubt that Michelle came out here. I think maybe it was a
Well,
picture.
that might have been Michael.
With
maybe the one I've seen.
Anyway.
All right, bud. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. And the phone lines are open again. We're coming up on the next commercial break. Okay, so apparently the leftists are upset. And apparently the reason they're upset is they had a national straight pride coalition. You know, there's all this talk about gay pride, this trans pride, whatever. And so there's this group that got together called the National Straight Pride Coalition. And they're asking the city of Modesto, California for a permit that would allow them to have a straight pride march in late August. And this has got the leftists spitting rainbows. Because apparently it's okay to have these gay marches, it's okay to have these tranny marches, but, you know, straight white people or straight people, you know, we can't give them parades. So, anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Now, back in 2012, the Federal Trade Commission reached a settlement or issued a settlement order against Facebook regarding the company's deceptive statements about user privacy. And today, the Electronic Frontier Foundation is basically saying the terms of the settlement agreement, which were announced today, are grossly inadequate to the task of protecting the privacy of technology users from Facebook's surveillance-based system of social networking and targeted advertising. And by the way, the stuff really is ubiquitous because I'm getting ads for stuff, and I'm saying, how do they even know I'm interested in this? And I think a lot of it has to do from the web searches that we're doing relative to our impending move to Indiana. But we're getting all these ads, you know, how to sell your house. And I've never owned a house. I've never been able to own my own home. So it is a little unnerving at times. I mean, half the time I just say, who cares? But I'd like to know just how much, you know, how much is Siri listening to me? And where does the information go? I mean, is it listening to me all the time when I'm snuggled up with my wife? That's a little disconcerting. Now, I know I can turn the Siri off, but that's a lot of work to go through. Anyway. Somebody just wrote on in and said, one of the nicest things about straight pride is that you get to have babies. And it's funny, but the reality is that because of liberal legislation, gay couples are allowed to have babies with artificial insemination. They're allowed to adopt, and which doesn't seem to have that much of a problem for the kid. But what a weird situation. Alrighty. Apparently Los Angeles is still overrun by rats. And there are people now saying they should declare a public health emergency. And Los Angeles is experiencing this rapid takeover of rodents. According to this new study, the spike in rats, which is linked to growing homelessness throughout the city, may cause economic turmoil for a city already experiencing hardships to its middle class. So Reform California released the report, which links the increase in rodents to upticks in once rare illnesses. For example, a Los Angeles police officer recently came down with typhoid fever. Boy, it is from Mickey Mouse to rats. All right, well, there's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here and get ready to travel. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller, and I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to What Really Happened. We'll be back on Friday, I think. Aloha, America.